Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and one of my favorite games in history has actually been censored, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as you all know, I used to play a game on my channel called SWAT 4. It was a sporadic upload here and there. I used to basically play, this video game. I used to live vicariously as Commander Muta. I used to scream at my operatives. I used to avoid looking at flashbangs. I used to raid entire buildings, saving hostages and bringing order to chaos. I'm not a SWAT agent in real life. It's my only way to live vicariously through a video game. And then the 2005 game, it had some of the freakiest stuff that you could imagine back in the day. There was one mission called Fairfax Residence where yours truly went into some random house. There's an old lady that greeted me, and as soon as I worked down into her house, I found out that her son was a little bit of a serial killer. And this is one of those games where, you can die after like a shot to the head, like in most real situations. So you only have about a second and a half to really make a choice. When you come across a bad guy, especially a bad guy with a hostage, what do? Do you shoot him in the head? Do you throw in a flashbang? You have to make these decisions quickly. Now, obviously, it's a game that reminds you that being a SWAT officer in real life is no real easy situation, okay? You gotta make tough choices. Choices that sometimes don't even end with good, sometimes there's not even a good ending to anything. But anyways, Ready or Not is the spiritual successor to that game. And again, I decided to go to the old Steam page and see just what was going on. And apparently it is mostly negative. 25% of the last 30 days, all the posts, all the user reviews are actually quite negative. Now, what happened? Did they ruin the game, functionally? Did they take out an entire level? Did they go out of their way and scam the user base? No, they actually had to censor the game. So I didn't know this, until like a few weeks ago, but apparently they were actually releasing the game on consoles. So for anybody that's on PlayStation or Xbox, you too can join the SWAT community. Now, this was a game that originally was announced like several years ago. I waited a long time for this game. I actually bought the supporter pack. I bought the super pre-order edition. I waited like years, especially through a pretty tough launch, just to actually end up playing this game for what it was, and it really is a very good game. But again, now it's coming to console, and because of that, apparently there had to be some censorship. There had to be some removing of the grittiest stuff. Now, obviously, the community is not taking it too kindly. For instance, on the old Ready or Not board, you can see that they have an announcement for the sequel. And the sequel just looks like it's ready for all those young kiddies. A game becomes successful. The devs randomly change what made it in the first place, has no idea why people are leaving the game. Now, I'm somebody that's a mathematical person, so I use basic math and data points to analyze if people were leaving the game. And actually, they are not. The game is actually trending upwards. And you might say it's because of a Steam sale, but generally speaking, this controversy really didn't kill the game, okay? We are kind of talking about what could just be considered a nothing burger. So what ended up actually getting changed, okay? So let's go to the old developers. Let's see what they had to say. So yeah, anyways, what they pretty much brought up was we recently shared that Ready or Not's PC version underwent minor content changes to support stability and align with policies enforced by global platforms, so PlayStation and Xbox, and age rating bodies. These adjustments were made to ensure a smooth global launch across platforms, while preserving the game's tone, themes, and intensity. And this game is not something that I would consider to be a non-toneful game. To give you a quick idea, Ready or Not is a very good, game that showcases, I would say this is more a horror game than just a tactical shooter. For instance, one of the levels where you're actually invading the Vole House, for instance, now this is a big mansion in the game that you actually go into, and when you work from top to bottom, what's really crazy about it is it's this clean, really rich, expensive area. And immediately when you go into this place and you start rating it with your team, you can notice that on, all the screens that there are videos of young girls. And then some of these rooms have, they're actually like, adult video shoots, right? They're adult video sets. And obviously the implication is that the dad is actually recording his young daughter. And the more you work down into this building, the more it becomes evident that this is not just the daughter, but it's more of an entire operation. Until you get to the very bottom of the house and you come across what is the most unnerving part of the actual job. you can actually see that there are rooms where they're filming these children and they're filming adult content and they're selling this illegal content out into the world. And in some rooms, you can come across, graves where they're dissolving some of these kids in barrels. So it's that kind of gritty, intense, atmospheric storytelling this game wants to go for. And it's that kind of stuff that as you're absorbing in, you're also fighting with actual evil inside these areas. I would consider this to be a huge horror game. So for us PC users who are playing this game that would treat us, with a realistic view of what these situations would be like, yeah, obviously censorship is probably going to drive people a little mad. So looking at the actual changes, they made 6 changes on the PC version that you can't, I guess, revert. So one of them is Twisted Nerve, where this girl, for instance, who would be on the bed, she would originally be convulsing, whether it be due to drugs, and afterwards she's just sleeping. So in the mission Lethal Obsession, where you have to raid some goddamn cabin in the middle of California where some guy's stacked up, ready for the end of the world.
Oh, I saw one.
Oh, hold on. Contest fire here. Get down.
Well, he is not going anywhere.
He didn't comply. You guys saw that, right?
Yeah, no, I was about to do the same thing.
He didn't comply. All right, fellas, I got a flash ready.
Man, bro's brains are all over that
was
wall.
the quickest, painless death ever. Okay. As soon as it pops, get ready to go. In their ghillie suit, they used to be naked. Now they are not so much naked. They actually were putting on clothes. Now again, I assume that for the consoles, having somebody run around naked isn't exactly a thing. It shouldn't be happening. Which begs me the question that obviously I think that these kind of censorship rules are a little bit weird because, you can have games like Cyberpunk 2077 where nudity is abundant. As long as there's an option that's present, I don't know why this couldn't have been toggled. Why did you have to remove my survivalist penis just for the sake of censorship? It makes no sense. But of course it gets even wilder. This is probably the most intensive change for me that I think probably is the biggest change, which is where they come across a bunch of female hostages in the mission called Hide and Seek. Now in the original, these hostages don't have any underwear on. So the moment you come across them, they are just completely naked. And, it really just sets a tone of what kind of evil you're going up against, right? These are human trafficking victims. Obviously, they put some underwear on them, so they're still human trafficking victims. Their private parts are now finally covered, okay? And I assume that had to do with, obviously, consoles, right? Like, let's be real, they had to have some nudity patch for it. Now, of course, there was an informant in the mission Narcos, where you actually raid an entire neighborhood of crazy drug lords, and, they put some underwear on the informant, which, again, doesn't really change how bloody this situation looks, but you get the idea. And of course, one of the big changes, again, another story change, is in the mission 23 megs a second, where you're raiding a streamer that is also a CP distributor. Yeah, they had a bunch of photos of minors on the desk, obviously nothing illegal showing, and they removed it with documentation, because I assume that when it comes to rating boards, they probably didn't want to play well with that. So yeah, the PC versions of games, a lot more cleaner than you would expect, okay? That's just how things work. Now, of course, the moment I look into any of the actual comments, dead game, censorship is bad. But one that I agree with is, it's not about the specifics, it's a matter of principle. Any amount of censorship is actually too much. And you know what? I do agree. Now, this is some would say this is a nothing burger because, to be honest with you, it's not like they cut out an entire level. I was thinking that, this backlash came from the fact that they probably cut out like the school level, for instance. I thought that might have been the thing because I was surprised when they even put the school live active shooting map in the game, right? I played this on stream, on video. I thought they might have removed the nightclub map, which I thought was probably the most hardest hitting map too. So if you don't know the nightclub map, you walk into this nightclub that's been shot up, and it's a place where as soon as you walk in, you can see just these pile up of dead bodies. And the thing is with these dead bodies, right, as soon as you get near them, you can hear like phones go off. So obviously people who are watching this nightclub shoot up on the news in the game are calling up their relatives, only to realize that their relatives are actually probably dead. And you as a SWAT agent kind of realize this. And as you soak in this horror, you have to deal with, again, these crazy terrorists shooting you up at the same time. Every angle you're getting bullets shot at you. So it's one of those intense moments that I thought maybe if they cut out a level, I could understand the intense backlash. Now, they did remove some gore. For instance, if there's bodies that have already been dead, you can't just, shoot the ever-loving gore out of them, but you can, however, deal with real bodies in a gore sense. Again, even from a censorship angle, it doesn't make any sense to me because games like Red Dead Redemption 2 let you pretty much dismember an entire fucking body after it's been dead. And somehow in that game it's okay, but in Ready or Not, I guess it's not. Maybe there's something to do with that urban thing. Maybe it hits a little closer to home. Maybe we don't live in the old Wild West anymore, so people don't get those analogs. But yeah, I think censorship just kind of sucks. If I look at censorship, I think of intensive moments in video games where, games like Modern Warfare 2, there were moments like No Russian, a game where arguably it's even worse than anything I've seen in Ready or Not because you have an entire level where they give you a fucking LMG. They tell you to go into Moscow International and shoot up every fucking civilian you can imagine. Like, imagine any game that tells you, yeah, commit a terrorist attack. You would imagine that from like some unknown game, that exists in the bowels of the internet. You wouldn't expect it from one of the biggest AAA games of the year, Modern Warfare 2. And when it comes to things like censorship, obviously, not big companies are immune from it. I know I mentioned Rockstar just a couple minutes ago, but even games like Manhunt and Manhunt 2, games that I've played on my channel, Manhunt 2 specifically has probably got me most of my age restriction, like, on YouTube, simply because the amount of gore and dismembering and violence that is on display in that game is insane. Not just gore and violence, but the themes, the actual stories. I mean, it is a truly unnerving game, all right? It's a game that takes the concept of MK Ultra to the absolute zenith. But yeah, censorship in video games. When you censor a product, when you censor a piece of art, I consider it to be almost insulting to the subject matter, right? Like this game, Ready or Not, it's a SWAT game that focuses on you stopping, human traffickers, kid diddlers, things like that. And when you raid their areas, obviously there are things that are going to be incredibly unnerving. There's things that are going to be, unsettling, as they should be. You're not raiding fucking Sesame Street, motherfucker. You are raiding Diddy's house. Well, actually, can I legally say that? You are raiding someone's house that could potentially be a human trafficker, okay? It's not gonna be a pretty situation. And that's where I think the whole Ready or Not stuff is really weird because, somebody that, when I saw this game coming out, I'll be completely real with you, I really stood by Void Interactive because it really felt like any time somebody tried to get them to, stomp on their vision a little bit about this game, they vehemently denied it. They vehemently went against the grain and released raw gameplay, raw actual material for us to actually goddamn be behind. And that's one of the reasons I thought it was really great as a PC game because they really dealt with the least amount of classifications as they could. But obviously, this is an independent company. They need to make the game for consoles, right? They need to increase, the amount of places where they put this game up. And obviously, I think a lot of this comes from PlayStation, Xbox probably telling them to, hey, if you're going to release this game, you got to make some changes. Now, where I'm not a fan of censorship, I've said that through and through, I also think that it's a shitty situation to be Void. They had to make some changes, and I think compared to losing an entire map, for instance, which would have been really bad, these are some of those changes where I feel like it might be worth swallowing if it means the game at least gets to be released with most of its content. Yes, things are changed, at least for a larger player pool, especially if there's things like crossplay. Like I imagine, if they want people to play together from console to PC, there's going to be, a focus on making one build and that's it. But I think that this still could be addressed if they decided to maybe put in a toggle for pre-censorship, post-censorship, maybe something like that. But yeah, it's a shame to see a game that I feel treats these situations seriously, ultimately censored in the end. And yeah, you got to go through censorship when you're selling any product, and it sucks, and I don't support it whatsoever. But I do feel that personally, the amount of backlash that it's ended up getting, I don't. Again, it's one of those things where I don't even feel like they want to do it. It's just one of those things where they presented a build to Sony and Sony and Microsoft. They were like, yeah, you got to remove a few things. And, I'm sure they probably argued it. I'm sure they lost it. And some of these censorship changes don't make sense because there's other games like Outlast 2, like Red Dead Redemption, like Cyberpunk, that are filled with nudity and gore and fucked up things. But this game has to change it, and those games don't. Again, the censor, it's not even like uniform, which is the shitty part. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen. You know, one of my favorite games got censored, but it is what it is. If you guys like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it, dislike it. I am out.